Hi everyone, welcome back to Mode Bespoke. I'm Atenas. For today's tutorial, we're making another Tunisian crochet hat, only this one is a crossed stitch. So let's get started. Alright, so here is our hat. This is the one that we are crocheting today. It is crocheted in a Tunisian stitch. So I used the Tunisian brim, which if you don't know how to crochet this, I'll put a link up here. So you'll be able to crochet this brim. And then this top part is what we're going to work on today. And then this is a crossed stitch. So it's a Tunisian cross stitch. As you can see, it goes diagonally. So you can see all these little diagonal lines. It is quite lovely. It's really, really easy to make. And this hat, because the one I'm making today, I'm going to use a different yarn just to show you how it would look in different yarns in different sizes. So this bottom yarn that I use for the brim, this is just a medium size yarn. I used a 4.25 millimeter Tunisian hook to make this. So you can use, what is it, size 4, 4.25, 4.5, or size 5 hook to crochet this. It doesn't matter. That one's up to you. Now for this top part, I did use a bigger hook. So I believe I used a 6 millimeter hook for this top part. This is a size 5 yarn, so this is a bulky. This was the wool ease that I used for the bottom, and then I think it was just the, I don't even remember what yarn I used down here, but this is just a regular medium yarn. So yeah, size 5, and then it's 6 millimeter hook, and then just your medium yarn. You will need a double-ended Tunisian hook for this because you are working in the round. So you can use one of these bigger hooks, or I'm going to use this smaller one. For me, it's just easier to use the smaller one. If you don't have a double-ended Tunisian hook, I did list a couple of links down below where you can find them. Otherwise, you can also find them in the Mode Bespoke shop that is available on the website. So I'll link that down below so you can find any of these hooks. I like these, they're quite small. The only thing with these is that the numbers, so they have these little numbers here, they do not correspond to the size of the hook. So this 5 is about the same size as my 4.25 millimeter hook. So, and then this is, see, 4.25. And this is a size 5. So if I put my H hook, which is my 5 millimeter hook, right next to this, this is a bit smaller. So that's the only downside to these, is that they just have these numbers that do not correspond to the size of the hook. So maybe it's just the average, I'm not sure. And then they're different sizes on either side, which is okay for this particular project because it really only matters the one that you start to crochet with. The one that you close your stitch with, it doesn't really matter if it's a bit smaller or a bit bigger. But we'll talk about this a little bit further along. You will need 2 skeins of yarn for this because you're going to need 1 skein to work at the beginning of the row and then 1 skein to work at the end of the row. So you will need 2 skeins of yarn. I am using 2 different colors let me see, let me move this over. For this hat, I used the same color. So I got 2 skeins of the same color and this is how it looks. So today, for the sake of experimentation, we're going to do 2 different colors. I don't know how long or how much I'll be able to crochet with this skein. So my hat may change halfway through the video, but I'll tell you more if it does. So we'll see how many rows I can do with these 2 colors. But I will also be using a different brim. So this is the Tunisian brim. So this is what it looks like on the outside. It's what it looks like on the inside. And it's nice and stretchy, but this is this brim. For today's tutorial, I'm going to use the ribbed brim. So this is just a basic brim. If you don't know how to make this, this is the easier of the 2. I'll link it up here so that you can make this brim. This one's also really stretchy. For this one, I just used the Bernat Super Saver, so it's just a medium yarn and a 4.25 millimeter hook. So you can use, again, whatever yarn you want. This one is thicker than this one. And it's also a lot quicker to crochet. So if you're in a bit more of a hurry, then go with this brim. It's a lot quicker to make than this one. This one will take you a little bit longer. So go with this one. But I'm using the 2 different ones so you could just see a different look for each of the hats, and then you can decide what you like best. So let's get started here with our first row. Okay, so here is our brim. So you're going to do this regardless of what brim you use, whether it's this one or the Tunisian brim. You still have to stitch it the same way. So if you're a little more advanced, what you're going to do is just crochet, single crochet, and then 2. Single crochet, then 2. Single crochet, then 2. All the way around. The reason for this is because the brim stretches, but the Tunisian work does not. So it will not stretch. It stretches up and down, but it won't stretch to the sides. So you need to make it wide enough and a little bit wider than your brim. So this is going to open it up just slightly. When you cinch the top, so when you sew the top closed, you won't even be able to tell that it's slightly wider. So it'll be unnoticeable. However, you will notice it when you put your hat on. So if you did a single crochet in every one of these stitches, this hat would be way too small. So the brim would fit, but the hat would be way too narrow. So let's get started with that. Let's zoom in a little here. So we're going to work in between the posts like this. So these stitches right here. All right, so I had to darken the image a little bit, so hopefully you can see this better, but we're gonna work in between these spaces right here. So taking your hook, and it doesn't matter what side you choose, whether it's the 4 or the 5, insert it into any of the stitches along the top of the brim. You're going to leave a nice long tail, which we will weave in later, and then you're going to pull that through the stitch. So you're going to chain 1. So notice that I'm using both threads of yarn here. Chain 1, and make sure that's nice and tight. And you're going to drop this extra yarn that you're not using. Now here, I'm going to try to use this to create a bit more of a background so you can see a little better. All right, so going into the next stitch, we're going to single crochet 1. So here's the stitch. Insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, and you're going to pull up a loop. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through these loops that you have on your hook. Like so. Now going into the next stitch, we're going to single crochet 2. So you go in, pull up a loop, and then you yarn over and pull through 2, and then you make another single crochet in this same stitch. So you insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then close your stitch. In this next one, we're going to single crochet 1. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and close your stitch. Go to the next stitch, and you're going to single crochet 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over and close the stitch, and make a second single crochet, not a double crochet, in that same stitch. So all along the brim, you're going to do 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochets all the way around. I will see you when you get to this side. Okay, once you've worked your way completely around, if you don't have an even number of stitches, so if you ended up with an extra stitch here or you didn't have enough, don't worry about it. That's okay. So just finish with wherever it is that you ended. It's not a big deal, because the important part was to get your stitches all along the rest of the hat. So if you have 1 stitch more or 1 stitch less right on this side, it's not a big deal. So let's continue on with the rest of the hat. All right, so once you've crocheted all the way around, so here is this beginning of the row, and then I normally leave these 2 on here just to help tighten the stitching, so that's why you see these here. But here's the important stuff. So here's the beginning of the row. You're going to skip this first stitch and you're going to work into the second one. So we're going to work with a Tunisian simple stitch. So this whole thing is done just using a Tunisian simple stitch that you're going to cross over each other. So you're going to skip the first stitch and Tunisian simple stitch into the second one. So for this, if you've never seen them before, you've got 2 threads on your hook, or on your stitch, I should say. So there's this back thread and the front thread. You're going to insert your hook behind that first thread. So it'll look like this. Now you just yarn over and pull up a loop, And now you're going to go to the one that you skipped, and you're going to do the same. So insert your hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Now let's go to the next one. You're going to skip this one, and you're going to go into the next one. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and now we're going to go into the one that we skipped. So insert your hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. We'll do one more. So you skip the first stitch and go into the second one. Now we're going to Tunisian simple stitch. And now you go back to the skipped one and you Tunisian simple stitch. So you're going to do this until you've cast on as many stitches as you are comfortable with on your hook. Once you do that, you have to work your return pass. So now your return pass is the same as it has been since we began the hat. So you just yarn over and pull through 2. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, until you get to the last 2 stitches. So here we go. So I've got my 2 loops right here. Now we turn around and then you just cast on again. So you skip one and Tunisian simple stitch in the next one, and then simple stitch in the next one, and then you do the same. So just keep on casting on until you get, or I guess crocheting your cross stitch until you make it all the way around. So I'll see you when you get back to this side. So once you've worked your way completely around, so here we're back to the beginning, and how do you know we're back to this big stitch? You've made it all the way around. You're going to end your row in one of 2 ways. Either you have the perfect amount of stitches and you can just continue crocheting, or you're going to have an extra stitch like I did. So if you have an extra stitch like I did, your work is going to look like this. So you're going to have this little cross, which is going to be right here, so it's this really big one. So you'll have this, and then you'll have this extra stitch. We're going to ignore it completely. It no longer exists. We're going to start on here. Why? And that, because here, I'll show you on this side. So with this stitch, you want the diagonal lines. So you want your next row of crosses, so these little X's, to be in between the previous row's X's. So you want the next one to be in here. If we were to crochet into this stitch, we're going to line up all the X's. So we'll end up with just a row of X's instead of interweaving them, I guess, so that you have a diagonal. So that's why we're skipping it. If at the end of the row, so once you get to here, if your row looks like this, only, I mean, with this stitch, but you have this stitch right here, and then you have this one in between, and then the next X, you're perfect. You're ready to go. So you can just continue working your Tunisian stitch into this one. So you skip here, work here, go back to here. So if you didn't, so I'll go over it a little bit more here in a second. If you didn't and your stitch looks like this, we're going to ignore this. This no longer exists, and we're going to start again here. So we're going to skip this stitch and go into the one that's in between everything. So insert your hook into here, yarn over, pull up a loop, and now we're going to go to our skipped stitch. Now if you want to stitch these together so this one's not as obvious, you can do that. So you'll create one big stitch like this. You can do that. That'll be a little less noticeable, or you can just leave it. So you just let it be and then just make your Tunisian stitch into the one stitch you needed it to go into. That's up to you. It's a preference thing, so do whatever you want. I'm going to work both of those stitches together just to make it a little less obvious, and then I'll go into my next one. Okay, so here we go. Here are our 2 X's. We need to make our cross stitch in between these guys, so we're going to skip the stitch above the cross and go into this next one. So we just Tunisian simple stitch in here, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then Tunisian simple stitch into the stitch we skipped and pull up a loop. And let's do this again. So we're going to skip this stitch and go into this next one. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So here, I'll do another one or two quickly just so you can see what, that you can actually notice your diagonal lines now. So here we go, this should be enough. There we go, and once I pull on this a little bit more, there you go. You can see your diagonal lines starting to form. So here they are right here. So by crocheting a cross stitch in between the crosses of the previous row, you'll start to twist your stitching towards the side, so you'll get that nice diagonal. So then once you've cast on all the stitches that you want or that you're comfortable stitching, you're just going to continue your return pass. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, until you have about 2 stitches left on your hook. And then you just cast on and keep on working. We've already done the foundation. We've already set it up in skipping that one stitch. So now the rest of your work, you don't have to worry about it. You just continue working in the round all the way around, over and over and over again, until you complete the height that you want for your hat. So that was the hardest part right here. That's it. Now that we're done, our stitch is set up and we don't have to worry about that anymore. So the rest of this work, you just keep crocheting until you get the height that you want on your hat. If you don't know how high that is, you can check out the blog. I do have the pattern. It's available there if you want to purchase it. You can purchase the PDF pattern. If you just want to get the heights and the measurements, that's available for free on the listing. So you'll see the height the height for the hat, and you're going to see the circumference. So if you just don't know how big to make it, I have from newborn to adult sizing. So I've got all of the sizing in between. That way you can make this hat in any size you want. Something to know about this hat though is that work a couple of rows, and then if this is for an adult, just try it on. Make sure that it fits comfortably, because this part doesn't stretch too much. So if this is too tight, then you're going to want to go back to your brim and do 2 stitches into every other stitch. So this single crochet row that we did at the beginning, you're going to want to do a single crochet, and then the next one 2 single crochets. Single crochet, 2 single crochet. That'll add width to your hat. So if you need this to be a bit wider. I didn't have that problem with this larger yarn because it's quite big. So in working your brim in a smaller yarn and then working this top yarn as a thicker yarn, I didn't have that problem. This is a lot bigger, so this ended up being a big hat at the top. So even working just 1 stitch per stitch of the brim, I was able to make this fit really comfortably. In fact, it's a little bit bigger up here at the top. So it's a nice loose fitting hat. Now, the written pattern that you're going to see on the blog, so the purchase pattern, the PDF one, I used this yarn. So this is the hat you're going to see. You can adjust it like we did here for the video, so use a smaller yarn. So that way you can use any size yarn that you want. If you still have questions as to what hook to use, I do have that on the blog, just kind of a general hook size for the yarns that I use, and that's just the general sizing I've used before. So it is adjustable. Just try it with a different hook, find the one that you like, and just get working with it. If you still have questions, you can leave them down below, either here or on the blog post, and I'm happy to help you figure that out. But I'm going to keep crocheting the body of this hat, so I'll keep working until I get the hat height that I want, and then I'll show you how to close up the top. So I'll keep working on that. I'll see you again in a moment. So once you've completed the height that you want for your hat, we're going to have to work on our bind off row. Now, in case anyone noticed, I did have to switch the color for the hat because I ran out of the blue yarn. So I will show you what to do if you want to switch colors. But in the meantime, let's talk about closing the top part of the hat so that we can cinch the top. So we're going to have to close all of those open spaces. So let me just finish my last few stitches here. There we go. And we're going to be left with these last 2 stitches. So here's this bottom one and here's this top one. So we're going to have to single crochet. So yarn over and pull through both of these 2 stitches just to finish off the row, or to close a single crochet if you want to look at it this way. And now we're just going to tighten this stitch up right here, turn our work around, and we're going to single crochet in the very next stitch. So let me just adjust my lighting real quick. That's the problem with working with natural light and really light colored yarns. All right, so we have to get rid of one of these threads so that we can do our bind off row. So we're going to get rid of this yarn that's here in the front. So to do that, we're going to single crochet in this next stitch. So just insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. So it's this one right here. And then we pull up a loop. We're going to have 2 loops on our hook, and we're going to yarn over and pull through both of them. And we're going to follow that up with a chain. So just chain 1 and then tighten up that chain as much as you can. So make it nice and tight and cut a nice long tail of yarn. We will weave that in later, but this will help us eliminate one of these 2 threads. So now that we've clipped this, we can get this out of the way. And now let's continue with our bind off. So let's get that yarn here out of the way. We're going to put this other yarn right here in the front. And this is going to be very similar to a Tunisian knit stitch. So we're going to stitch into every one of these stitches. And if you don't know what a Tunisian stitch looks like, let me zoom in here a little bit so I can get a little bit closer so you can see. And then we'll go through just a step-by-step how to do this stitch. So you're going to insert your hook into in between the 2 threads of the stitch. So if you take a closer look here in the stitch, there's going to be a front thread and a back thread. So insert your hook in between both of those, and then you're going to push your hook all the way to the back. So let's get this little tail end out of the way. So see, you've gone all the way through towards the back. Let me move this a little. All right. And now we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, like so. But this time you're going to close your stitch like you would a single crochet. So you're going to yarn over and pull through both of the threads that we have on our hook. So yarn over and pull through. So it's a knit stitch single crochet if you want to look at it that way. So we're going to go into this next stitch. We're going to insert our hook in between both of the threads of the yarn. And make sure you go all the way through to the back. Yarn over and pull up a loop so that you have 2 loops on your hook. And then we just yarn over and pull through both of those loops. So we'll do another one here together. So here's our next stitch. Insert your hook between both threads of the stitch and go all the way through towards the back. Yarn over and pull up a loop. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through both of the threads on our hook. So that's it. So I don't know if you want to call that a knit stitch or just a knit stitch single crochet, but we're just going to bind off. And what this is going to do, let me just crochet a couple more really quickly, is it's going to close all of those gaps that are left in between the stitching, which you usually have when you're crocheting in a Tunisian stitch. It just pops those stitches a little bit more open. So you usually have to do a bind off row. If you're working with the bigger yarn, you might not have to. So it depends on the size of your yarn. But this is what it'll look like once you've gone through and you've done that knit stitch at the top. So here's the other side. So you can see the stitches are a little more open. If you're going to sew it shut anyway, so you don't have to do a bind off row if you really don't want to. You can just sew a little bit lower along the bottom of your hat, and as you sew along the top, it'll close it. I just like to do the bind off because it makes it a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier to work with in this next part of the hat, which is where we're going to be cinching the top. So we're going to be sewing it shut. So just continue to work the rest of the row the same way if you're going to be doing the bind off row. I'm going to finish the top part of my hat, and I will see you again in just a moment so that we can cinch the top closed. Alright, so you've made it all the way around. We're back to the beginning. And we're ready to sew our hat closed. So you're going to want to leave a really long thread of yarn. This is the same yarn that you're going to be sewing the top with. So leave a nice long piece, and you're going to need a yarn or a tapestry needle in this next part. So now before I sew, I like to just make a chain. So it's going to chain 1, so we make a little knot here at the bottom. Tighten that up. And then I'm just going to pull my hook out and pull the yarn out along with it. Like so. So there we go. So our thread is ready to use. So now grab your yarn or tapestry needle and get that threaded through, and then we can get started. So I'm going to sew the top part of the hat a little bit differently than I normally do. If you watched any of my other video tutorials, normally I work with the very top of the hat. I'm going to work a little bit lower just so you can see what it looks like. If you're going to add a poof, it still looks really nice, but it's just a different way to cinch the top closed. So it's just a different look depending on what it is you want your hat to look like. So here, now that I'm ready, okay. So all you're going to do, and this is really quite easy, is you just insert your needle towards the back of your work. So just anywhere. Skip a few stitches, and then you're going to insert your needle from back to front. So you can use the top stitch, or you can use a little bit lower. So I'm going to sew this a little bit lower today, like I said earlier, just to show you guys what it would look like. Skip a few stitches and then sew from front to back, and then skip a few, go from back to front, and again skip a few, front to back. So once you have a couple of stitches done, you'll be able to tighten up the work on the top. So you'll be able to pull on your yarn and close up the top part of your hat. So let me get the stitch done here, and then we'll tighten this up so you can see what it looks like. So see, this will just cinch it closed. And there you go. So as you're working along, just continue sewing along. If you run out of thread at the top, just pull on your stitches a bit, like so, and then you'll end up with a little more yarn to work with. Sometimes I've cut the yarn a little bit too short, so I need to just keep a really tight pull on the yarn to just keep the top closed so that I have enough yarn to finish sewing. But go along, just stitch along the top part of your hat. I'll finish this and I'll see you again in just a moment. So I've made it all the way around, and I've just tightened on pulled on the yarn so I can tighten the top. Make sure it's as tight as you can get this, and now you just have to sew across it a few times. You can go in a star shape, you can just sew across however you feel, just randomly, however you want. The point here and the goal is just to continue to close the top part shut. So I'll sew along the top here for a moment and just show you a couple of stitches. And after every stitch, just be sure you pull on the yarn so it's nice and tight and it closes up that top part. And really there's no right or wrong way to sew this top part closed. Just work with what you've got and whatever sewing skills you have, you'll be just fine. Once you've sewn the top closed as much as you want, you're going to make a little knot along here in the center, and then you have to go through and weave in your ends. So cut a nice long tail of yarn, and then I'll show you what the inside is here. So you're going to have to hide all of these threads. If you use a different color like I did, you're going to have a couple more threads to hide. If you want to know how to switch your yarn so that you can use two colors, line up the two yarns so as you run out of yarn or you cut the thread where you want it to go. Just use your two colors, knot them up like this, leave longer tails of yarn than this so that you can weave them in later. So a little bit longer than this, but that's all there's really to it. So you just cut the yarn you are currently using, switch to the new color, and make a knot. That's it. And then you continue working like you normally would. There's really no other trick to it. It's a really easy color change. It's a lot easier than most of the other color changes. The only problem is that you will have this extra little stitch where you began to switch colors. I have no idea how to get rid of it. If somebody does, go ahead and let us know how in the comment section, but I don't really mind this one little stitch. But that's it. So this is what your hat would look like if you would have used the two color yarns from the very beginning. I only had a little piece of the blue left, so that's why I had to switch between the blue and the white. But there is a small sample for you to see. Now just don't forget to weave in all of your tail ends. If you don't know how, I will leave a video tutorial up here on top that teaches you how to weave in your ends. It is a very helpful technique and it'll help keep your work from unraveling. So once your hat is done, all you have to do is just pop on a label and pop on a pom-pom if you want one, and you're ready to go. To get the written pattern for today's tutorial, you can visit the Mode Bespoke website, and that's modebespoke.com. You can find the link in the description box below. I'm also going to link the Mode Bespoke shop, where you can find the yarn and the hooks that I used today in today's tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you've enjoyed today's tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up or let me know down in the comments section. That way I know what kind of videos you guys want to see. To see more of my work, you can follow me on Instagram. That address is on the main screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, y'all, and I will see you again in the next tutorial.